There's a moment most people don't talk about. It's not dramatic. It doesn't look like failure from the outside. It looks like a normal day, where you said you'd start, but didn't. Where the plan was clear in your mind, but your body stayed still. Where motivation whispered, and then disappeared. And slowly, without noticing, days turned into weeks, and weeks into quiet frustration. Not because you're lazy. Not because you lack ambition. But because your brain is protecting you in ways you don't yet understand. Most people try to fix their life by changing outcomes. They chase results. They set goals. They wait for motivation. But they ignore the deeper system running everything beneath the surface. Your brain is not designed for success. It's designed for survival. It avoids discomfort, seeks familiarity, and repeats patterns that feel safe, even when those patterns are quietly ruining your future. And that's why effort alone doesn't work. Because effort fights the brain. Habits. Reprogram it. The first hidden shift begins in a place people underestimate, the moment before action. Not the action itself, but the invisible negotiation that happens inside your mind right before you begin. You tell yourself you'll start in 5 minutes. You check your phone one last time. You wait for the right mood. And without realizing it, you're training your brain to associate action with resistance. This is where most people lose. Not in the work, but in the starting point. There's a subtle habit that changes this completely. It's so small it feels almost meaningless. But it's powerful because it removes the need for motivation entirely. Instead of thinking about the full task, you shrink the entry point until it becomes almost impossible to avoid. A single sentence. A single push-up. Opening the document. Just beginning. What this does is interrupt something psychologists call decision fatigue. Every time you delay starting, your brain drains energy deciding whether to act. But when the action is too small to debate, the decision disappears. And something interesting happens next. Once you start, your brain shifts state. The resistance fades. The emotional weight dissolves. Because the hardest part was never the work. It was the transition. This is how microactions begin to rewire your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles to start and begin becoming someone who moves without negotiation. But there's another layer most people miss. Even when they manage to start, they don't continue. Not because they lack discipline, but because their environment is silently working against them. Your surroundings are not neutral. They are shaping your behavior every second. The phone within reach. The noise. The clutter. The invisible cues that trigger distraction. You think you lack focus, but in reality, your brain is simply responding to the environment it's placed in. There's a quiet habit that transforms this without force. Instead of trying to control your mind, you begin to design your surroundings. You make distractions slightly harder and focus slightly easier. Not dramatically. Just enough. You move the phone out of reach. You prepare your workspace before you need it. You reduce friction for the behaviors you want and increase it for the ones you don't. This works because your brain always chooses the path of least resistance. And when the easiest path leads toward progress, consistency becomes natural. Over time, this creates something deeper than discipline. It creates alignment. Your environment and your intentions stop fighting each other. And when that happens, you no longer rely on willpower. You rely on design. But even with the right environment, there's a hidden force that quietly sabotages progress. It's not distraction. It's not laziness. It's something more subtle, open loops. Every unfinished task, every unresolved thought, every "I'll do it later" creates a small amount of mental tension. Individually, they feel insignificant. But collectively, they overwhelm your attention. Your brain keeps returning to them, trying to close the loop. And this is why you feel mentally exhausted, even when you haven't done much. There's a habit that gently resolves this. Instead of carrying everything in your mind, you externalize it. You write it down. You capture the thought the moment it appears. Not to act on it immediately, but to release it. This simple act signals to your brain that the loop is acknowledged, that it won't be forgotten. And suddenly, your mental space begins to clear. This isn't just organization. It's cognitive relief. It allows your focus to deepen, your attention to stabilize, and your mind to stop running in circles. Because clarity isn't about thinking more, it's about holding less. As this clarity grows, another transformation begins to take shape. It's quieter, deeper, and often misunderstood. Most people believe success comes from pushing themselves harder, forcing discipline, fighting their impulses. But this approach creates tension, and tension is not sustainable. Eventually, the mind resists. It rebels. It burns out. There's a different path, one that feels almost counterintuitive. Instead of forcing behavior, you begin to shift identity. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" This question changes everything. Because behavior that aligns with identity doesn't require force. It feels natural. When you see yourself as someone who shows up daily, even imperfectly, your actions begin to reflect that. Not because you're pushing, but because you're expressing who you are. This is how habits move from effort to identity. And once that shift happens, consistency stops being a struggle. It becomes a reflection. But identity alone is not enough. Because there will be days when you don't feel like that person. Days when doubt creeps in. When the old patterns whisper louder than the new ones. And in those moments, another hidden habit becomes essential. The ability to reduce the emotional weight of failure. Most people treat missed days as proof that they're failing. They attach meaning to inconsistency. They tell themselves a story. "I'm not disciplined enough." And that story becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. Because the brain protects identity, even when it's negative. There's a subtle shift that breaks this cycle. Instead of seeing failure as identity, you see it as data. Neutral. Informative. Temporary. You don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" You ask, "What made this difficult?" This removes shame from the equation. And when shame disappears, curiosity takes its place. Curiosity leads to adjustment. Adjustment leads to improvement. And suddenly, failure is no longer something you avoid. It becomes something you use. This is how resilience is built. Quietly. Repeatedly. Without drama. As you begin to integrate these shifts, something interesting starts to happen. Your progress becomes less visible, but more real. You're not chasing bursts of motivation anymore. You're building systems. You're creating patterns. And most importantly, you're changing the way your brain responds to effort, discomfort, and repetition. There's one more layer that ties everything together. And it's often the most overlooked. The way you end your day. Most people don't think about it. They finish whatever they were doing and move on. But the brain doesn't work in isolated moments. It works in patterns. And how you close one day shapes how you begin the next. There's a quiet habit that transforms this transition. At the end of the day, you take a moment to reflect. Not to judge. Not to criticize. Just to observe. What moved you forward? What slowed you down? What felt easy? What felt heavy? This reflection does something powerful. It strengthens awareness. And awareness is the foundation of all change. Because you cannot improve what you do not notice. Over time, these reflections begin to reveal patterns, triggers, behaviors, hidden tendencies. And with that awareness, you gain control. Not through force, but through understanding. And then, slowly, almost invisibly, everything begins to shift. You wake up differently. Not dramatically, but with a subtle sense of direction. You begin tasks with less resistance. You recover from setbacks faster. You feel more in control, not because life is easier, but because your mind is no longer working against you. This is what real transformation looks like. It's not loud. It's not immediate. It's quiet, gradual, deep. Because success is not built in moments of intensity. It's built in moments of consistency that most people ignore. And these hidden habits, they don't just change what you do. They change how you think, how you feel, how you respond to the world around you. So instead of trying to change your life overnight, consider this. What is one small action you can take today that requires no motivation? What is one friction you can remove from your environment? What is one thought you can release instead of carrying? Don't try to do everything. Just begin. Because the person you're becoming is not built through pressure, but through quiet, repeated decisions that reshape your brain over time. And one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you'll look back and notice something different. You didn't force yourself to succeed. You became the kind of person who naturally does.